Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the challenges Pakistan is facing at this time in the wake of US withdrawal from Afghanistan, also the recent US visit of DJISI and NSA and the ramifications of that on the whole geopolitical situation as far as Pakistan is concerned, Afghanistan is concerned, the US influence in the region and the fact that the role of regional powers also and what is expected in the next couple of months vis-a-vis the role that the US is now willing to play, the diminishing role of America as far as Afghanistan is concerned. All of that today on Perspective. With a view to that, let's look at the overall geostrategic position. The team has also prepared a package to that effect. Let's hear that.
Pakistan's National Security Advisor Mahrukh Yusuf concluded his 10-day visit to the United States. He held various meetings with key government officials including his US counterpart Jake Sullivan. They discussed matters of mutual interest ranging from the Afghan situation to growing animosities between China and the United States. Talking to US-based Pakistani journalists, Mahrukh Yusuf made it clear that Pakistan shared the same interests as the United States in helping Afghanistan to achieve peace and prosperity. He also expressed Pakistan's interest to remain neutral in Sino-US tensions. National Security Advisor Mahrukh Yusuf lamented that although Pakistan was trying its best to help create a peaceful Afghanistan, we could see very conscious, deliberate effort by the Afghan government to scapegoat Pakistan. He also dismissed the rumor that Islamabad could exert leverage over the Taliban.
Right, I have with me today Brigadier Rashid Wali Chandra, who is Acting President of Islamabad Policy Research Institute. Thank you for joining us. Tariq Farhadi, who's a Senior Regional Analyst. Thank you for joining us. Muhammad Ayaz Wazir, who's a former ambassador. Thank you for being with us. Brigadier Sahab, as far as the situation, the geostrategic situation after the US withdrawal is concerned, how do you see things now, particularly in the wake of Dr. Mahrukh Yusuf's visit also to the US?
Yes, Dr. Mahrukh in fact has repeated the same stance of Pakistan, which is very consistent,
right,
that we want a Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution, and it's a solution which has got to be inclusive, and which got to include all the stakeholders, and any forcible occupation will not be agreed. And I think it's a very consistent and a very circumspect approach, because the international community is not amenable to any forcible occupation and fratricide civil war in Afghanistan.
Right. But how do you see the response now, in terms of what the US has to say to that stance that we've consistently taken, like you're saying?
I think there has been some development on that, and we are going to see on August 11 Troika Plus meeting in Doha, which would be attended by Russia, China, Pakistan, and these are the countries which have major stakes, and these are regional countries. And the United States presence also underscores, and Zalmay Khalilzad's stewardship, that underscores the seriousness of United States also. I think United States is in a very precarious position at the moment, having pulled out and having committed to a stance that Afghan factions would not be allowed to enter into a conflict situation. It's very difficult on ground once you pull out the troops and then you try to retain a leverage.
Some sort of control, right? I will come back to you. Let me go to Tariq Farhadi ji. Tariq, how do you see the situation in terms of, we've been talking about how Pakistan's stance has always been consistent. We've always said that we want there to be peace in Afghanistan. We've also said that as far as leverage is concerned, Pakistan doesn't have as much leverage as US seems to think now. What is the situation, in your opinion, as far as Pakistan-US relations in the wake of that withdrawal now?
Greetings to you. Yes, indeed, for Pakistan, I think it would be much better if the Pakistan-US relations went beyond the Afghanistan dossier. we would say, because Pakistan is a country of 220 million people, developing country with challenges, and it does need investments from the region, but also from the United States and the international finance organizations that are mostly held by the United States. So the challenge has always been is how to create relations between the United States and Pakistan that are not overshadowed by the Afghan dossier. In Afghanistan, the crisis is really taking catastrophic nature. I'm using the word that the UN representative used last night at the Security Council. And the nature is that we are in a situation where two parties are warring at each other. Taliban, who feel emboldened that with the exit of the United States they have won the war, and the government, who is still armed with the army and with a commando force that's loyal still to President Ghani, and the commando force amounts to perhaps 30,000 people out of the 300,000. It's only the commando force that's fighting, but they're lethal, and they have an air force that in order to get back to the Taliban is willing to bomb communities in Afghanistan, which potentially create civilian casualties, which is not acceptable to us.
Do you think that the U.S. is actually seeing things that they are, the way they are on the ground at this time, as far as Pakistan's influence in the region is concerned, our role is concerned, or are they influenced perhaps by India, for example?
Well, the U.S. knows about India-Pakistan relations, so it will hear what India has to say, but it's not going to affect what the U.S. is going to decide. Although there are a few Pakistanis in Washington D.C. who used to be prominent in Pakistan and have official posts, and now they are lobbyists for that kind of movements, as you know, and they have a loud voice. And but decisions will be made. Pakistan is an important country for the United States. So is Afghanistan, because it has had a 20-year presence and it doesn't want to really have a bad history. And the risk here is that with this situation of chaos, that's to turn into a Vietnam type of legacy. Nobody wants that. The Afghans don't want that. The U.S. doesn't want that, and that's why we are trying to broker something very quickly. And Pakistan doesn't want it. No, because the Taliban, yes, they have been in Pakistan. They have been sort of protected by Pakistan over the 2 decades, but now they are sort of a free bird. They have issued a communique against Pakistan in Spin Bulldog because Pakistan has established controls at the border. So this is a group that is going to be very difficult to control for anybody. And I agree.
I'm going to go to Muhammad Ayaz Wazir Sabji. Ayaz Sab, if you heard Tariq, to use his words, he said that this is going to be a move that's going to be difficult to control for anyone. Do you agree with that? I mean, the way that this thing is now happening, do you think it could potentially blow up for the whole region? Isn't that true?
Well, obviously nobody can control anybody else outside of his jurisdiction, leave alone a strong group like the Taliban fighting within their own country. The Taliban wanted security protection when the U.S. was present in Afghanistan with full might, which the Taliban got not only in Pakistan but other countries also extended support. Iran was supporting, even Russia extended support. And when the Americans decided to leave, that, as our friend said, emboldened the Taliban to go back and full force. And once a movement which is fighting for liberation of his country or a moment of their part, you cannot control when they reaches almost to its target. Taliban are about to achieve that, as most of the analysts say so, though I personally do not yet agree to that. There still is a long distance to cover because it's not only taking over, it will be the administration of that area also, which will not be that easy if they take, for example.
Do you think that our role as far as Afghanistan is concerned is perhaps not being read by the US accurately? The pull that we have as far as Afghanistan is concerned has considerably reduced, which is what we've been trying to tell them.
Well, I think they know us very well. We know them very well. They were sitting in Afghanistan for 20 long years, in addition to the fact that US is a neighbor of every country almost. It's present everywhere. So they know about us, we know about them. Now, how to look at that or assess that looking at each other? Are our interests the same in Afghanistan? I am afraid at some time, yes, we were on the same page as they say. But now I think we have decided to be on different pages. And when you are on different pages, then knowing the position of the other country, your own interest would not allow to come closer or accept the argument of that country. The interest we have to bring closer to each other. It's not only to say, it's easy to say that we want peace and the American want peace. That way nobody in the world you would find to say that we do not want peace in Afghanistan. Everybody says so, but how many really can contribute or in a position to contribute? The US was in a very strong position of restoring peace in Afghanistan or making the Taliban and the Afghani government agree on a future dispensation when they were really in a very strong position. But look at the Doha Agreement. The US dumped Afghani behind and directly went to the Taliban and made a deal with that. That obviously was like weakening Afghani. Now, they have, after taking their own soldiers out, they have again made a claim or say to reassure Afghani that we have not abandoned Afghanistan, we have only taken our soldiers, so we will provide you help in your security and help you financially. And I was reading a report just a little before, as if they have already sent B-57s to Qatar for taking Taliban to prevent them from taking the bigger cities. But my question is, my question to America would be that if you have to use B-57s or aerial attack to that side, then why you had attacked Afghanistan to begin with, and when you attacked it, captured it or occupied it, then why you left it unresolved? What were you doing for 20 long years? Why couldn't you find a solution? Pakistan certainly wants a solution, a peaceful solution, but it's not only Pakistan and the US that have serious interest in Afghanistan, or if I may use the word that other countries have interest in Afghanistan. Pakistan has its states involved in Afghanistan. So we would love other countries to come and use their influence on any side, be this the government in Kabul or the Taliban, to come and sit together and find a solution to the problem that they are facing. Because fighting is not a solution. Fighting will continue.
I will come back to you. Brigadier Saab, do you agree? You think that of course we want a solution to Afghanistan. We want all the stakeholders to sit together and do that. And of course America's role as far as, going into Afghanistan and then the hasty way that they have now decided to abandon it has led to a lot of the chaos there. And unfortunately, being the neighbor that we are, our geostrategic position, we've had to deal with, we are going to be dealing with a lot of the aftermath. There's no denying that.
I agree with you because in order to understand Afghanistan, you've got to understand its history. You see, many peace plan has floundered on the rocks of distrust. And if it happens this time around, circumstances are more dangerous. We know Afghanistan and it's the current situation where the amber dots where the government is losing control are increasing by the day. So unless the international community and the regional countries and all peace stakeholders in this peace, they take time by the forelock, all these attempts would wither on the vine of distrust.
So what do you expect? What do you expect from, I mean, on that note, what do you expect from the international community? What do you expect from America at this point?
Yes, America should understand that the stakeholders have to be given a level playing field, and any attempt to alter the scales would redound to the disadvantage of this all peace process. What is happening now is that there's a deal agreement between United States of America and Taliban, whose annexes we don't know what was there in that. Taliban say that United States has not held its end of the bargain. There are still 7,000 Taliban prisoners in the jail, and Taliban, they have not been delisted from UN sanctions. So all these things are genuine grouses on part of Taliban, and if they see still bombings being done, killings occurring, then that climate will not be engendered where a genuine peace participation from them is expected. I think to hold its own end of the bargain, some tangible concessions will have to be made to show the sincerity towards the peace process, and this August 11 meeting is quite crucial, in which some concrete proposals should be laid out, both on part of the United States and the regional countries. When we come to the regional countries, I believe that nobody can influence this peace process better than the regional countries.
Okay. And by regional countries, you mean Pakistan, China,
Russia, Iran, and Russia. And India, yes, if India can also be, impressed upon to, lend its shoulder, I think that would be a positive development. Russia already, under the rubric of SCO, CSTO, and other agreements, it is trying its best. China has, hosted recently spokesman Mullah Baradar, and they have shown their willingness to enter into a cooperative relationship. And in terms of realpolitik, Taliban has shown in Badakhshan, wherein they have so far reigned in, because Badakhshan is a polyglot mix of Tajiks, Uzbeks, Chechens, all kinds of fighters. And I think if Taliban agree and the regional countries somehow could convince, which include Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, these can come up with a joint declaration that look, we will not countenance forcible occupation, we will not countenance a fratricidal civil war, we will not countenance an emirate kind of an arrangement. Then Taliban would also see the benefit of peace, and if the regional countries can exert some kind of influence upon the United States to make some tangible concessions to show its sincerity, like for instance delisting from of Taliban from the UN sanctions list, and some release of the prisoners. So these are the tangible means by which the idea of a inclusive government and interim government which is acceptable to all can take place.
Right. Okay. Let me come back to you. Tariq, do you think that it's a possibility, the kind of tangible concessions that Brigadier Rashid is talking about by the U.S. To show that there's sincerity and perhaps diffuse the situation to a certain extent? Do you think that that's possible?
The U.S. wants to have to arrive at an acceptable solution for this crisis, and this is a rare moment where the U.S., China, and Russia are in agreement that the solution has to be a political settlement in Afghanistan. The problem is that President Ghani is not yet convinced that if it continues like this, it endangers the security of the Afghan civilians, and even if he hasn't lost the war, he must accept that for the civilians it's a loss. So we must go towards a place where both sides can accept an interim government, a caretaker government of 2 or 3 years, and neither Ghani will be in that government, or neither perhaps head of the Taliban. The Taliban have said we don't want to necessarily to govern, but we want to govern. We want to see people who are honest to Afghanistan to take the reins in Afghanistan. So this interim government could have the guarantee of the United Nations Security Council. It could even have some blue helmet forces in Kabul only for the security of that government, and these blue helmet forces could be from Muslim countries. Indonesia is a candidate for that. And that way there is an assurance for both sides that we have to land somewhere, because in this way Taliban will continue violence in the quest to gain more territories, but they know that fighting in Kabul will not be easy, because in Kabul most of the commandos are in Kabul, the military forces in Kabul. There's no logistical problems to project force, and also all the people who have gotten very rich during the 20 years of U.S. presence from contracts, etc., they have militias in Kabul. So there will be street-to-street fighting and blood on the streets. It won't look good for anybody. And we need to find a solution to put in place a political solution before it gets to that point. And when the U.S. exits at the end of this month, basically the August, the chances of this catastrophe gets bigger and bigger. So this month is crucial.
Right. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Mohammad Ayaz Wazir Sabji. Asif, how do you think that, how realistic is it, as far as the situation in Afghanistan is concerned, to expect the Taliban? I mean, of course, they've annexed vast territory at this time. But what do you expect in terms of the movement further? How much do you expect the Taliban to gain ground, considering the situation there at this time?
Well, I think according to assessment of the experts and even the UN, the Taliban, I think today are having more area under their influence than the government. The government, in my assessment, is limited only to the major cities, trying to defend that only. But it's not a question of having an area under your influence. My question, as I said earlier also, is how to govern it. Governance is a real problem. If the Taliban wants to take over these places by force, then many countries, including Pakistan, have already declared that we will not recognize you. And in addition to that, the Afghan people will not sit idle to accept them in a form of a government which they want to bring in. A single or a one-sided government, either by the Taliban or the Afghan government, is not acceptable to the entire Afghan nation. I will not talk about the foreign countries. It is a major problem of Afghanistan. First, it should be acceptable to them. A government which is acceptable to the Afghan, in my assessment, would be, say, a combination of the two fighting forces. They have to sit together, they have to make some sacrifices, they have to come out of their circles, like Ashraf Ghani says that, well, we will decide it through elections. And one knows that the Taliban are not going to accept elections. Or as a proposal was made earlier, much earlier, that an interim government should be established for some time till the two reach some agreement. But that was not acceptable to Ashraf Ghani. So let's not give them suggestion from outside how the two to come to a solution of the problem. I think they can resolve it, provided we convince them to come and sit together for serious negotiation, not like the one in Doha. Wuhan,
How?
in my assessment,
And when you mean we convinced them, you mean Pakistan's role?
well, Pakistan's role, India's role, Iran's role, America's role. Look, India is very close to Afghanistan, and Iran is also close to them. America, because of them, Afghanistan is sitting there. Now, they should put pressure on him to accept some conditions, to agree to some conditions which are acceptable to others also. But Afghanistan is not accepting anything other than himself continuing in the chair. It is like, if I can give you the example of late Professor Burhanuddin Rabbani, when he was driven out of Afghanistan by the Taliban in the earlier term when they took over Afghanistan, Kabul. He was driven to Mazar-e-Sharif. From there he was kicked out and he was sitting in Tajikistan, where the court body recognized him as a president of Afghanistan. Now that is a mockery. Whosoever is out of his own country, how can they be a president of his country? Now, this is to be left to the Afghans to decide. Neither Ashraf Ghani can decide, nor can Mullah Brother decide, but the two and the third group in Kabul is the political leaders or the warlords sitting outside of the government, but they have good influence in the people. If they can come around, they can find a government acceptable to the people.
Right.
An ideal government.
Do you agree with warlords like perhaps Abdul Rashid Dostum, who also recently returned to Afghanistan, can play a role in convincing them, and then Ehsan Mero also, all of these people can play a role?
They can play a role, but they can muddy the waters as well.
That's
so
right.
we've got to view that with a lot of circumspection, because Dostum has just returned,
right,
and he has a history of animosity with Taliban, which borders on visceral antipathy towards each other.
Okay.
So I don't see how he could be a part of a solution. Only way is that if he remains out and allows those elements amongst his faction which are more acceptable to Taliban. Now, we must understand that all these efforts need a deeper understanding of the fundamental concept, that is the asymmetry of will. As far as the international community is concerned, and the regional actors also, at the moment they are all looking at the whole thing from the prism of asymmetry of resources, which has never been the game clincher in Afghan context. It's always been asymmetry of will, and on will score, I believe Taliban are having an ascendancy, because they've got a ideology which is supported by their rank and file and field fighters. And in order to ensure that there is a genuine, development towards peace, the international community and United States must ensure they do not arm the rival factions.
Right.
At the moment, in this entire potpourri, there's a lot of, which is brewing, disturbed. There are, countries which are arming the rival factions. There are arms flowing from the Europe to factions which were allied to the erstwhile Northern Alliance. Some funds are going to Taliban. There were 2.5 billion, opium, heroin, narco economy there. We need to understand that an armed forces which needed 5 to 6 billion US dollars to maintain themselves, how are they being maintained at the moment? And is it prudent to support them and to fuel this fire and ensure at the end that a lot of devastation takes place and the asymmetry of will ultimately prevails? Because in that one context, the famous limerick of Kipling, that a scrimmage in a border town, a canter down some dark defile, 2,000 pounds of education drops to 10 rupees jazail. So when that happens, the concomitant would be devastation, which is already taking place. We know they are into Lashkar Gah, Georgian are just Shabar Khan. They have taken the prison was broken, the press is showing all over. There are 360,000 IDPs at the moment from Balkh, Badakhshan, Kunduz and the 7 provinces which were affected. So in a way, a humanitarian crisis has already begun.
Right,
and that's why I say that this time is very crucial for international community and the regional countries to forge their consensus and give some tangible incentives to incentivize both the stakeholders, major stakeholders.
So what can we, what incentives can we offer to, for example, the Afghan government? If we talk about, offering both sides some tangible, you're saying we need to offer them some tangibles.
I think security is one tangible incentive, because at the moment their biggest worry is what will become of them if Taliban come, and whether they with their medieval, erstwhile mindset would cause some kind of a...
How do you see the narrative of a different Taliban this time? Do you agree with that? Do you think that it's a different Taliban? Are we talking about different kind of Taliban here?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, in a manner that is a whole new generation which has come up, and amongst Taliban also they are more exposed to the world, they are more media savvy.
Are they more humane?
They are more, they are clear about their survival instincts, and that makes them humane, I think, because for their own survival they know that they cannot sustain their occupation without economic and political support of the international community. I think this chastens them, and if the mere survival instinct mollifies them, this part I say yes, and no, in a manner that they have an ideology.
Are they still as barbaric, you would say?
I don't think so. They have manifested, because it's a realm of conjectures, but we
but
cannot...
what you're saying, I think I want to go with that. I think that's very aptly put. I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Tariq. Tariq, do you think that it's true? I mean, we've been talking about how is it the same Taliban? Is it a different Taliban? Is it a more humane Taliban? Are they as barbaric? I think Brigadier Rashid, the word you used, I think, was, can you repeat? What did you just say?
I said that merely for their survival instinct.
Yes, you said that merely for their survival instinct, they may be a different Taliban. What's your take on this?
There are several Taliban. There is the Taliban that are sitting in Doha. Their function is to act diplomatically, to say very nice things and to say the same thing and talk out of a script, actually. But then, 5 days ago, they hanged 2 people in Helmand from a pole. They just hanged them. And they said that these people had kidnapped children, so we hanged them. Okay, fine. But can there be some judgment, justice? This expeditionary type of justice is not even good for the Taliban if they want to present that they have changed. Then also the other thing is that the situation is so chaotic in Afghanistan that very bad things will happen in Afghanistan, whether it's with Taliban or in the hands of other people. But it will all be the responsibility of the Taliban, because they are creating this situation of attack, fear and chaos. And Afghanistan is a very complicated country. There is going to be a lot of vendettas and killings that have nothing to do with Taliban, but have to do with the 20 years of war where other people have been killed. And now their families are finally they are finding the opportunity to settle their scores. But in this situation, even the Taliban will not have control. They will lose control. And this is why the political leaders need to agree that there is a point where sitting in Doha and just saying nice things is not enough. They have to take control. They have to agree with the United Nations and other powers, including Pakistan and the region, for a transition government. And they have said we don't want to govern. So in that case, they should say, okay, if we don't want Ashraf Ghani should resign as well, and a third party should come as caretaker for 2 or 3 years to steer the country and the region, frankly, from this catastrophe. Because right now, the risk of people coming as refugees to Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan has said we cannot take more than 100,000. Pakistan has said this time we can't take any. But in reality, there will be Afghans going to Pakistan. And right now, yesterday or today, Afghans crossed the Iran border, including Afghan soldiers with American-made Humvees and military vehicles. So this is getting out of hand. Clearly, Kabul doesn't control everything. Kabul doesn't control every region. Kabul only controls a few kilometer squares of a province where they send the commandos. But this is not enough. This is not sustainable. They might take back Lashkar for 3 weeks, and then when there's a crisis somewhere else and the commando goes to this other province, Lashkar will fall again. So, but then in the middle, the people pay. Yesterday, there were images from Lashkar that the stores were burning and people were emptying their stores before their carpets. There was a carpet store. The carpet seller was emptying the store before the whole store was burning because there's aerial bombardment, there's fighting street by street. We don't want that to happen in Kabul. We don't want that to happen in Mazar. And we have to wake up, get smart, and find a political solution from both sides.
Right. Let me come back to you. Muhammad Ayaz Sahab, do you agree? You think that, of course, primarily I think everyone agrees that there needs to be a political solution. Also that, regional countries need to be involved, and there has to be some sort of middle ground as far as Taliban and the government in Kabul is concerned. But what next steps do you think need to be taken to ensure that, more chaos doesn't erupt?
Well, I think the countries that have already been mentioned, the immediate neighbor of the countries in the region, they have to put pressure, more pressure. America is also to come to that point, to make, as I said, the two agree, or at least then maybe some sort of a temporary change, particularly in Kabul. I feel the problem is more a creation of Kabul than of the Taliban. I am not taking side with the Taliban, but Taliban refused, if you recall, earlier when they wanted to talk, they insisted that we want to talk to the American, not to the Afghan government, because that we do not recognize it's a puppet government. But later on, when they finished or concluded an agreement with America, then on our persuasion and other friends talking to them, Taliban agreed to. And this was understood that the two will have to go for a formation of a future dispensation. It was not that the Taliban were to join the Kabul government, or the Kabul government was completely to be given on a silver platter to the Taliban. The two were, if I may use the word, to mesh together to make a government for the people of Afghanistan in Kabul. But unfortunately, the two are sticking to their guns, trying to make the other agree to their conditions. That will never come to. The two, I feel, are impossible to happen. The way the negotiations are going will not find any solution. It will go on, it will drag on, it will go on, fighting will continue. And the second is, if we leave it to the fighting, well, that may bring in some kind of a solution temporary, but that will be a temporary solution. If the Taliban people will not...
The caretaker government is a solution. Is it a possibility? Do you think there can be some sort of agreement there?
I'm saying I have not finished what I wanted to say. This is unfair. You have stopped me from what I wanted to say at the end of already what I said. Very unfair.
Please complete. I can't hear you. I couldn't hear you.
Now you have completely destroyed what I wanted to say. Now I don't want to say anything. Thank you. I will not join your show anymore.
Your choice. Brigadier Rashid, as far as unfortunately we're on Skype and it's not always possible to hear. Do you think there is a possibility, you were talking about a caretaker government, do you think that there can be some sort of agreement there?
Yes, I think Ambassador Ayaz was also alluding to the same, and what he said was in fact that an interim government and all-inclusive government, everybody would definitely welcome that. And the intent is also the same.